Welcome to UNIGINE Programming Quick Start tutorial, implementing game logic and using properties. In this video, you are going to learn how to make a property library and add it to the world, how to manage properties, how to implement game logic using properties. In our project, we're going to make a property library, inherit a property from the standard surface-based property, and add two parameters. Selected, to indicate if the object is currently selected and we must highlight it, and material, to store the name of material assigned to the surface of the object in order to reset it when selection changes. We're going to use properties to select objects and highlight them by changing their material. Here, we will modify selectObject function and addMeshToScene method, utilize our mouse input handler, getObjectUnderMouseCursor, and selectObject methods from the previous sections. We're going to add a pointer to store previously selected object to reset back its material. We're going to modify removeMeshFromScene method in order to check if we remove currently selected object to handle this situation correctly. Upon completion of this section, we're going to have something like that. We're going to make a property library, which is a simple XML file. So here we type the name of the library. Then we specify the current XML version. It's 1.0. And the encoding we're going to use. It is a UTF-8. Then we insert the properties tag and specify the current version, 2.0. Inside the properties tag, we are going to specify our properties. In our case, there's going to be only one. We're going to name it surfaceBase1. And we are actually going to inherit it from the basic surface-based properties. So we specify parent equals to surfaceBase. Now inside the property tag, we can specify the parameters. The first parameter is going to indicate if our object is currently selected. So we name it selected. And we specify the default value 0. So the next parameter is going to store the material for our object. So we call it material. And we specify the type of this parameter. It is a string. And we'll write here some default value, like some text. Okay. And then we close the parameter tag. So our property library is ready, and we're going to save it as an XML file in the data folder of our application. So we call it myPropertyLib. And specify the prop extension. Okay. Now our property library is ready and we can use it. Okay, in our header file, let us declare the pointer to property manager. So we call it properties. The next thing we do is we're going to declare a pointer to the previously selected object in order to restore back its material. We call it alt selection. Then we're going to declare our init properties method, which is going to initialize all our properties. And of course, we're gonna need the clear properties method that we are going to call on the world shutdown. So, okay. Now in our CPP file, let us modify our add mesh to scene method a little bit. And we're going to use a string variable. We call it a new property name. We're going to use it to store the name of the properties we're going to assign to the newly created objects. The name of the property will be composed of the object's name with the property postfix. Okay. So now we're going to assign the properties after assigning materials to the surfaces of the object. So first, we inherit a property. We use inherit property method of the properties class. First, we specify the property to inherit from. As you remember, we called it surface base 1. Then we specify the name of the library where our property is stored. We called it myPropertyLib. And then we're going to specify the name of the property that we're going to inherit. Well, now we're going to change the property in the setProperty method. The standard surface base property we're going to replace with our new created property. For this purpose, we use the string variable we've declared. Okay. And we're going to change the property here. So we're assigning a new property to the object surface. Okay. As we got the property, we're going to set its parameters. So first we're going to set the material parameter. For this purpose, we retrieve a property for the surface with a 0 index. And we're going to use the setParameter string method, in which we specify the parameter we're going to set. We use the getProperty method of the ObjectMeshDynamic class. We specify the 0 index of the surface. And then we call the findParameter method, which is used to find the index of the parameter with a given name. So I specify the name material. And then we specify the value to be set. The next parameter we're going to set is our selected parameter. So the construction here is almost the same, except that we use the setParameter int method. And we also specify the index of the parameter. For this purpose, we again call the findParameter method and specify the name of the parameter selected. And next we specify the value to be set. We're going to set it to 0 because the object is not selected by default. Okay, next thing we're going to do is we're going to add a new initialization method that is going to initialize our properties. The method that we called initProperties, as you remember. So, okay. First of all, we must initialize the pointer to the property manager. For this purpose, we use the get method. The properties class is implemented as a singleton also. So, and then we must add a library. For this purpose, we use the addWord library method. And we specify the name of the library that we just created, mypropertylib.prop. Okay. And now we return 1. On success. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to implement our cleanup method. Clear properties. That is going to remove the properties we've created. So on success we return 1. And to clean up the properties, we just call the clear method of the properties class and specify the name of the library, mypropertylib.prop. And the next thing we do is we call the remove world library mypropertylib.prop. So, well, seems like everything's ready here. The next thing we're gonna do is we are going to insert the call to the initProperties method in our initialization method of the upward logic class. Okay. And the next thing, of course, we must perform the cleanup at the world shutdown and call the clear properties method. Okay. And we're also going to reset the alt selection pointer by calling the clear method. So, okay, now let us modify the rest of the methods. And we'll start with update objects. Here we're going to implement our properties logic. So we declare a property pointer and we initialize it by calling the getProperty method of our object. And we specify the 0 index for the surface. Then, if there is such a property, we're going to retrieve its parameters. For this purpose, we use the findParameter method, as you remember, and we specify the name of the parameter selected, because we are going to check its value. If it is equal to 1, this means that our object is actually selected. So the findParameter method returns -1 if there is no such parameter found. So we're going to check this condition. If everything's okay, we're going to get the value of the parameter. We're going to get the value of the selected parameter. And if it is equal to 1, this means that our object is selected. We're going to change the material of our selected object to the mesh base material using the setMaterial method, as you already know. Okay. Otherwise, if the object is not selected, we're going to reset back its material. For this purpose, we're going to get the material parameter using the getParameterString method of the properties class. And again, to find an index of the parameter, we use the findParameter method and specify the name of the parameter we want to find. So now our highlighting logic in the update method is implemented. Now let us modify our selectObject method a little bit. Here, we're going to add a new parameter, an object pointer. This is a pointer to the alt selected object. We're going to use it to restore the material of the previously selected object. So now, if our object is selected, so here we check if our new selected object has the parameter named selected. And if we got the previously selected object, first of all, we must reset back its selected property to 0. We use the setParameterInt method and retrieve the index of the property. Named selected. And we set it back to 0. And the next thing we're gonna do is we're going to set the selected parameter of our new selected object equal to 1. For this purpose, we again use the findParameter method, and we specify the name of the parameter. And the next thing we do is we're going to store the pointer to our new selected object. Okay. And on success, we're going to return 1. Okay. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to modify our remove mesh from scene method a little bit to handle the situation when we delete the currently selected object. So if we have a previously selected object, and it is actually an object we're going to delete, then we must clear the old selection pointer. So, okay. Now we're going to add the second parameter to our selectObject method. And now we can check what we've got. Well, now we've implemented object selection and highlighting using properties. In the next section, we're going to learn how to create user interface.